Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our fifth generative AI event, which is all around agents and reasoning in the world of finance. Throughout this event, you can use Slido to kind of submit questions, to kind of upvote questions and stuff like that, that we'll then pass on to the panel later on. So please kind of go to Slido and access this particular event. And just to quickly talk through the agenda today, I'm going to take 5 to 10 minutes just kind of introducing the event, talking a bit about the white paper that we're launching, and a bit around the kind of trends we're seeing using agents in the kind of advice wealth management industry. I'm then going to pass it on to Emma, who's the CTO and co-founder of Portia AI, who are doing like phenomenal work connecting agents together and doing that in a really safe and secure manner. Emma used to be the UK CTO at Stripe and was also a Googler for a number of years. Yeah, just really looking forward to that particular talk. We've then got a talk from Alvaro from Google, who are doing phenomenal work with a variety of different firms, finance firms, but also TMT sector, health sector, and beyond, not just here in the UK, but globally. And he's going to be bringing together a whole bunch of learnings from all of that and kind of use cases and almost like best practices and trends that he's seeing from all of that. We've then got a short break between 10 and 10:15. During that, you should definitely go and grab some food because at the end of the event, by the end of the event, the food will be cleared up. So, and the brioche bacon butties are incredible. So definitely grab one of those. And then after that, we've got a panel discussion with Roger, Akash, Alvaro, and Mike. And all throughout the event, you can kind of submit questions via Slido. So there's not going to be questions at the end of each of the keynotes, but there will be the opportunity to submit questions to the panel to kind of run through. And then at 11, we've just got networking for a short period of time. Right, so I've got a little anecdote to kick things off with. I've just come back from a 4-day trip to Rome, and it was a last-minute trip. Didn't get a chance to kind of book tour guides and all that kind of stuff. So as I was walking, as we were walking around Rome with our kids, they obviously have a huge number of questions about everything we're seeing, which I just found very difficult to answer. And something that struck me was one of my kids just turning around to me and just saying, "Just ask ChatGPT, Dad." We're in the Pantheon. This is the Pantheon. For those who don't know it. And they were just like really curious about, the design of it, when it was built, like, was it Roman, was it Christian? Like all these questions were coming up. And I just was able to whip out my phone and on voice mode, start asking these questions. And obviously from that, you can go beyond, right? You can turn it into the pictures that you take. The Studio Ghibli style is very, very much on trend and in fashion right now. And even go further to making GIFs and all these kinds of like cool animations with what you're seeing out there. But just the aspect of having that information, interacting, and that whole kind of UI UX experience of being in a certain place and finding out a lot more about what you're seeing, what you're immersed in, which is super powerful, and just shows like the breadth and the degree to which this technology is spreading. Just to remind everyone, so we had an event around AI agents in December as well, and that was kind of really when the term was very kind of new and nascent in the market. And there are plenty of different definitions of what AI agents are and what they can do. But the one that we've really settled on here at Multiply, or one that we feel works well, and we kind of run with in our white paper, is that AI agents are software systems designed to act autonomously to achieve specific goals. And there are 3 kind of really core features, aspects, dimensions to these agents. There's one around them being able to perceive their environment. So there's like the input aspect of agents. There is the ability for them to reason, think, plan, and make decisions, and figure out what they should be doing. And then finally, and this really is a game changer, they can then take those actions to do stuff, to accomplish tasks. And what we're seeing, like one of the biggest trends we're seeing over the last 3-4 months, not just in our industry, but beyond, is the whole lexicon and the whole conversation around AI is changing. It's going from where we were back in 2023 all the way through to 2024, where AI was very much seen as being at the interface of content or information and being something that you could ask questions to and get responses back and generate content and that kind of thing, to now thinking about what can AI do? What tasks can it accomplish? And that is, we believe, a super exciting shift that will almost, it's going to be the kind of step up in AI ability that I think will supercharge productivity and usefulness. I think it will really, really increase the surface area of usefulness of what AI can do for us. And then beyond that, there's, that the underlying models we're using are just getting better and better. And what that means is that it's almost creating this flywheel. It is supercharging the effectiveness of what these agents can do, what they can accomplish, and this kind of the depth of what you can get AI agents to kind of the tasks that they can do for you. So there's the 3 aspects to this. There's one which is around the inputs on the input layer. Because models are able to process past unstructured data, not just in text form, but multimodally. So by that, I mean audio, video, images, so many different types. It means that there's so many more ways in which you can kind of create the triggers and the inputs to these different agents that you can construct. And it also means that the time to market and the ability to spin up these agents is super, super quick, because you're not having to wait for APIs or, a lot of data. If they're data scientists in this room, a lot of what they spend their time doing is cleaning data and making sure it's in the right format for it to be processed or connecting to certain APIs securely. With AI agents, because there is that ability to really comprehend information in so many different ways and forms, and most importantly, in the most natural forms that we communicate and kind of generate this information, that's super powerful, and that is, again, supercharging the usefulness of the agents that we can build. There's the planning side of things. So this is where there's been step-ups over the last 3 to 6 months, just in terms of the generalized problem-solving ability of base-level models that we're using today. So the latest models coming out by the big model houses focus a lot more on reasoning ability. There is some specialisms going on now. So if you look at what Anthropic are doing with some of their latest models, they're quite focused on coding ability. There are those that are more focused on maths and physics, but there is so much more coming through now where these models can problem solve in a much more generalized way, take a task that is quite complex and very intelligently break that down into sub-tasks to do, come up with a plan of action, and deploy and leverage all the kind of available useful tools around it. And actually, a really cool demo I went to that Emma gave about a month ago was showing her software going through this planning process and almost like maximizing the score of different planning approaches to solve like a massive research problem. And then finally, it's action. And again, like the thing that is really powerful here is with the kind of development and the evolution of the underlying models is language is the universal format in which the world interacts, the world triggers action, the world does stuff, right? Whether it be communicating via an email or calling someone or entering something into a booking system, whatever it may be. The way we do that today is using words. It's using the language that we use, and that is a core output. That is a core capability of these underlying models. So we're not only seeing like the framework of these agents materialize and the kind of software and the technology and the ability and the tool sets like from the likes of Google arise which allow these agents to be built, but we're just seeing the surface area of where you can apply them and the depth in which they can solve and complete these tasks get more and more advanced. This is like a recent quote around AI, and I think it really captures, I think, where we're going with AI agents. So AI will change the way we work, but more importantly, it will change the way we think. And this is what we're starting to see over the last 3 months. This point around, I'll just go to this slide first, but this point around not just what does your tech stack look like, where are you deploying AI in terms of what AI tools are you using, is changing through to what will your AI workforce look like. What will, this kind of slide I've got here is an org chart where I've put in a few boxes where you could have, certain roles being conducted by an AI version of what people do today. It could be an executive assistant, it could be a finance agent, it could be a reporting agent, it could be something on the power planning side, but there's so much emerging now whereby these boxes can start to be colored by using AI agents to really, really supercharge the productivity of firms that are out there. And this is the way people are starting to think about AI. Actually, what I'm most excited about, and this is really the roots of Multiply and why we founded the company originally, is what we're building and exploring on the direct-to-consumer side. So this is where we have a powerful deterministic advice engine, which is rules-based, that can generate recommendations, generate advice. And we used to, back in, for a number of years, from 2019 all the way through to 2022, we had an iOS and Android app in market. It had, many aspects of the journey, from fact-finding all the way through to generating a plan. But it was a linear journey. The collection of information was a customer filling in details about themselves. The presentation of a plan was presenting a financial plan to someone with recommendations, and we would constantly optimize the language we used and the way we'd communicate those recommendations so they landed and customers would understand them. Where are we today? There are all these kind of product challenges we faced when we had the linear app, like really getting to know our customers, where we wish we could have a conversation with them, where we wish we could ask follow-up questions and dig a bit deeper, and that's where we're getting to today. And this is what really excites me. There are all these kind of product limitations or challenges we faced over the years where we had a direct-to-consumer app, where now by combining generative AI with deterministic systems like an advice engine or a risk system and so on and so forth, we can get the best of both worlds. We can engage with customers, have more of a conversation with them, understand more about their goals, but then when we generate the plan, we can explain it in a far better way. We can allow customers to dig in and ask questions about the bits and pieces that they're less sure about. And then at the end of it all, we can make sure that customers, our clients, go on to take out the recommendations. We can determine the market, badger them, chase up with them, follow up with them to make sure that the actions are then carried out. And a lot of these kind of questions that are coming up in the market are kind of the reasons why we wrote our white paper on this topic. So very much like the original white paper that we launched back in 2023, we just felt there were lots of questions that people had about how AI agents can be deployed, how do they work, what's a really, sorry, that second line should not be beast areas to use agents. So that's a bit of a typo. Should say best areas to use agents. There we go. But maybe we should have beast areas, who knows. Maybe that's a follow-up. But how do these agents work? What are the key aspects to think through? Where are the best areas to kind of deploy these agents? What are the big risks and challenges? Now that we've got AI that can do stuff, that can move money around, that can open products, that not only creates this whole surface area of possibilities and usefulness, but also risk, right? And thinking through the guardrails and how you can make these kind of AI agents behave, which is literally going to be Emma's talk in a moment, is going to be so critically important. But we also cover things like best practices and building them out, what people should be thinking through. And then we've got a whole host of worked examples, including one of my favorites, which is a date night app, which is pretty cool. So you don't need to download this. We'll be sending this out to all of you in the coming days. But we hope you find it as useful as the last white paper we launched. And on that, I'm going to pass it on to Emma. So Emma's going to run through, as I mentioned, really the kind of the safety aspects around agents, how to make them behave, how you can make them controlled, whilst also getting to do all this kind of super useful stuff that we can get them to do. Over to you.
So I'm going to talk today about our experience in how to build reliable AI agents. So wanted to start first with a definition. I was very pleased to see that our definition also 100% aligns with Multiply's definition. But this is such a nascent field and moving so quickly that if you look online, there are a whole bunch of different definitions of what an AI agent truly is. But it comes down really to two things, autonomous decision-making and access to tools. So it can actually use software, it can use the internet and that kind of thing. When we first started Portia, which was about a year ago now, the technology to run reliable agents just wasn't really there yet. The LLMs weren't ready, the frameworks weren't ready, and the conversations that we had with kind of VCs at the time was that agents could be a few years away from really being at the point where you could deploy them in production. What we see now is that 2025 is being described as the year of agents, the year when this is really going to hockey stick and take off. And I'm going to talk a little bit about which part of that is hype and which part of that is reality. Okay, so what are some of the key components of AI agents? So fundamentally, it's all based around an LLM. An LLM takes input in text form and it produces output in text form. And so when you talk about AI agents, all that's really happening under the hood is you're giving it a prompt with a bunch of descriptions of tools. And it's saying, I want to send an email with these inputs. And then what an agentic framework does over the top of that is it actually performs the action of sending the email and producing the output, potentially feeding that back into the LLM again. But it's really important to understand there is nothing underneath this that you haven't already seen when you've interacted with ChatGPT, right? So the same issues with hallucinations can occur with agents in the same way that they do just when you talk to ChatGPT or your model of choice. So they can also handle kind of more complicated control structures, so things like if statements, etc., depending on the underlying framework that you're using. So we talked a bit about this already, so I'm not going to dwell on this for too long. But essentially, what you can do with agents is really expand the capabilities of natural language. So rather than this kind of conversation, you can turn it into something that can fetch data, process it, render results in a beautiful way, etc. And that is the power of agents. But in reality, what we're seeing is production deployments are being slow. They're much slower in reality than the hype cycle would lead you to believe. And it's because of these three things primarily from the conversations we've had, right? So agentic frameworks have only just kind of come into being, or the ones that are really good anyway. Obviously ours has launched a few months ago. Reliability is an issue and security is a concern. So here's some examples of multi-agent workflows. When we refer to multi-agent, again, there's a few different definitions, but think of having kind of workers calling different tools, coordinating with each other, etc. Now, when we talk to enterprises, particularly fintechs, that's our kind of target segment for custom agent deployments. These are the themes that we actually see in terms of production deployments. So tier one support effectiveness. So you have someone who essentially has to read a policy, maybe it's a refund policy, and it says something along the lines of, you know, if the product was bought in the last 3 months, the product is, faulty in some way, and they have to make a decision based on that. And all of it is described in natural language. With an agent, you can feed that policy in, and you can have it make decisions on behalf of that support agent, vastly increasing their effectiveness. And then customer kind of standardized requests. I think this is very similar. But often you'll have a back and forth with a customer, say over email, for example. So one of our customers, they have to go out to suppliers and collect various data in a number of different formats. And it's quite a complicated piece of data that they need to collect. And so what they are deploying is an agent that can essentially have that conversation over email and assess whether or not they've got that data to the point that they need it to be. And then the last one is kind of research agent, so accessing what used to be the kind of domain of web scrapers, but in a way that is much less brittle and a pain for the engineers on the team. So we are an open source SDK for AI agents. We have closed source proprietary software as well that we have developed for running these reliably. And these are the kind of 3 pillars that we have identified that really help create these production-grade agents. So the spectrum of autonomy, which I'm going to talk about in a bit more detail, is how much autonomy and decision-making do you really want the agent to have? And in reality, coming back to this hype cycle thing, a lot of production agent deployments are really kind of workflows with a bit of LLM on top, is how I like to describe them. The second bit is human in the loop. So let's say your agent gets to a point where it's like 75% sure of a conclusion. In that situation, it shouldn't take a decision, and you should be able to come back to whoever is the human operating it and have a structured conversation about what it should proceed with. And then the last piece is authentication. So how do you make sure that your agent has access to the correct systems and isn't going to go haywire and do something that you're uncomfortable with? Okay, so the spectrum of autonomy. So in terms of workflows, we've had these for a while. You can encode kind of graph nodes of what a traditional agent might do, and it's very brittle and it takes a lot of time. So these systems have existed for a while. People add a bit of LLM on top. The other end of the spectrum is fully autonomous agents. You give it a task and it's a black box and it goes off and proceeds to do that. So if I just skip to the classic example of this, there's a few multi-agent frameworks like this. This is the OpenAI SDK for what it's worth. And what you do in order to create reliable agents in these structures is you create mini agents. And so what you can see here is you've got a refund creation agent, a refund policy reviewer, and a file read agent. And the hope is by kind of decomposing agents into these smaller blocks, you will get reliability, but then you still do what we refer to as prompt and pray, right? Which is where you give it a prompt and you really hope that it's actually doing the thing that you wanted it to do. Now, this is an example that we created on the OpenAI SDK whereby it proceeded to do the reimbursement and then proceeded to inform us that it shouldn't have done that. So classic example of an unreliable agent in production. This is the other end of the spectrum, workflows. So you can see you're having to define these like very manual steps with a little bit of LLM over the top to try and map between these. And we think that there is a different medium that can work for this instead. And so our approach is to basically always pre-express the plan that the agent is going to do. We don't have these mini agent nodes. Instead, we have agents that have roles, and those roles are very tightly defined, scoped, evaluated, etc., and it can accommodate a whole bunch of tasks. So the first step of any agentic flow that we run is our planning agent. It produces a plan, which I'll show you in a second, and this can then become your future guardrail for future deployment. So you create a set of plans that you like, you can feed them back in a reinforcement loop, and that way you get the best of both worlds. So it's not a manual workflow that you have had to code yourself, but it's not a full spectrum of autonomy either. And so that allows us to kind of balance between those two ends of the spectrum. We then spin up execution agents, which have access to a whole bunch of tools, which obviously users can define, and those produce clarifications. Clarifications is this human in the loop concept, which is a first-class citizen and something that you can render in the, in your own user interfaces. How many people here have seen the operator demo? Okay, not as many as I had thought. In the operator demo, the kind of core thing that it does is it hands back control back and forth between the human and the agent to complete its task. Operator is ChatGPT's web-based agent system. And we think that that is a core tenet. It's not handing back just natural language questions. It's handing back structured objects that can be rendered nicely for things like forms, right? If you're going to ask someone to fill out their payment details, you would not ask them manually to enter their account details and then in the next chat message their sort code, etc. You would put an actual form in there that they could fill that you could validate in place, right? That's what this allows you to do in terms of structured input and output. So in terms of authentication challenges, this is really why we ended up focusing on reliable production deployments of agents. And it's because companies want to both ensure that agents can access only the right data and tools, and that they can only access those tools if they're supposed to. But they also want to have autonomy, right? And it's kind of like, well, which one do you want? And authentication is the place where this comes to a head, because if you give an agent access to a whole bunch of tools with a whole bunch of access, you've really given them complete autonomy. And that's why we started thinking so deeply about this question. And so with this pre-articulated plan that I mentioned, you can extract from it the auth requirements of that plan and scope the agent to only be able to do exactly what is in the plan. And so it becomes, again, a kind of guardrail system around the production deployment. So you can see here something that I'm going to show in a minute where you've got a multi-step flow and it's pulled out a number of auth events. We can also use clarifications to do this on the fly, and I will show that now. Okay. So don't worry, I'm not going to show too much code for too long. We'll switch over to the dashboard in a second. So this is the 20 or so lines that need to be run to get Portia up and running with this particular example. We aim to have graduated complexity. I'll just explain what it's doing. So the Portia object has a set of tools. There's about 100 tools in here, and we expect our agents to pick the tool that they need rather than have it tightly coupled, but you can tightly couple it if you want. We then have the plan step, and we'll see the plan that it produces, and then finally it runs the actual plan here. So the task that I'm going to ask it to do is the following. I'm going to ask it to get my availability tomorrow. I'm going to ask it to then schedule a 30-minute meeting with our demo address, and finally it's going to send the person I've scheduled it with an email summarizing what has happened. Okay, so a little bit more code. So first thing that it's doing is producing the plan for this particular task, which it has done here. And I'm actually going to switch over to our dashboard to show this in a way that is slightly more friendly. So what we have here is, just got to sign back in again, is the example that we were just looking at. And it's produced this plan, right? So this is the task that we were just looking at, and all of the tools that it has access to that I was referencing. Now, we have a system that can scale up to about 500 tools with very little degradation of quality. It's not the one on our open source repo, but we're always happy to talk about it. And you can see that it's got this set of steps. So it's going to get my availability using our check availability tool, then it's going to do the scheduling, and then it's going to send this actual email. And the way that this works also means that at any point you can always track what exactly your agent is up to. And so at the moment the agent is in progress, and you can see that it's already completed the first step. So I've got some availability tomorrow, and where has that gone? Which is down here. So it's shown me that the availability that I've got is between 11:30 and 12:30 and 3:30 and 5. Now, when it has got to the point where it needed to send the email, it's recognized it didn't have the authentication to do that. And so it's produced this structured output here, and it's gone into the state of need clarification, right? And so you could render this in a button. We haven't done that, but if you were a developer, that's super easy. And so I can then click on this and proceed to give it access to just my emails, right? The actions that it needs to complete this particular task. And we will then see that this will be picked up. In a second, it's gone back to ready to resume, which means, and then it's going to flip to in progress as it proceeds through the task. And so hopefully this step always takes a long time when you're doing a demo, believe me. It will actually send that email. So we'll give it 1 sec. Now, what it didn't do was ask me for the calendar authentication. And that's because I've actually already authenticated it to calendar, and because of the way my personal settings work, that means that I didn't ask it to authenticate again. Again, graduated spectrum of control and autonomy. And it has completed, so let's see what it did. Okay, so this was my calendar. It's put this meeting in at 11:30, and if we look at my email, hopefully we will see that. Okay, we'll look over here instead. So it sent the email. A 30-minute meeting for Portia AI demo was scheduled from 11:30 to 12 with Portia demo at Portia Labs, and the email was sent. So that is how the system works overall. Thank you very much.
So thank you everyone for coming. I hear you want to learn a little bit more about AI agents, so hopefully we deliver on that. So today I want to cover 3 things. Firstly, a little bit on trends that we're observing in terms of getting value from AI agents. Secondly, we've selected a few relevant Google AI technologies that we think will be interesting for you. Last week was Google Cloud Next, which is our yearly conference, and there were a lot of exciting announcements that came from that, so we want to share a bit more on that. And then finally, we'll wrap it up with a couple of demos and examples of AI agents. My name's Alvaro. I'm an AI specialist with Google, and my role is to work across UK, Europe, and Middle East with our customers to better understand our AI portfolio. So if our customers want to solve a challenge, they're interested in AI, I help them understand what we have, so to tie it back to a solution. So starting with value from agents. So we see AI agents as a natural evolution. About 2-3 years ago, ChatGPT helped AI break into the mainstream, but back then, AI was really simply an LLM and basic prompting. And we've seen the evolution of that over time, and ultimately we've landed at technologies that allow for multi-agent systems that can solve problems autonomously with the direction of humans. And as such, we're entering a new era of AI innovation and adoption. We're observing a few key trends. Firstly, multimodality in thinking models. So a lot of emphasis on different types of data input and output. This is video, audio, text, image, but also thinking models. So a renewed emphasis on being able to reason and execute tasks. Secondly, agentic workflows. So things like planning, reasoning have become part of the norm, and a lot of models are now tailored towards being able to do those things. And this includes technologies like memory, short-term and long-term memory, and so forth. And then finally, the knowledge frontier. We're seeing that the way humans, but also AI, access information is being reinvented. So things like search, protocols for accessing information are becoming a thing. But we're also seeing, in spite of technology still maturing and being emerging, we're already seeing a lot of our customers capture a lot of value from AI agents. And this is a few examples of use cases across industry, but specifically for financial services, a lot of the emphasis that we're seeing are things like risk management, so processing and generating documents to assess risk, customer service automation, and empowering agents, but also creating a first line of defense based on AI to be able to respond to customers' needs, and many other use cases around productivity and middle office operations. And I think Emma covered this really well, so I'm not going to dwell too much on AI agents. Yeah. But we see AI agents as 4 components. So we're going a bit beyond the model and also talking about tools. And tools can be data, but it can also be downstream systems, like in Emma's example, calendar, email, orchestration. Did that work? Oh, perfect. Thank you. Orchestration, which is the brain of the agent. So this includes things like instructions, prompts, short-term memory, long-term memory. Short-term memory would be, for instance, when you chat online with a chatbot, the context of that conversation would be short-term. But if you wanted to remember many different sessions, that would be more long-term memory. And then finally, runtime, the infrastructure where everything is executed. And we talk about Gen AI, AI agents, AI, many buzzwords all day. And it is true that this technology has forced us to rethink about what a problem is. So for instance, before being able to sift through thousands of documents at once wasn't possible. So it wasn't really a problem. You just had no other choice, whereas now that's started to become a problem. Nonetheless, we still encourage not to fall for the buzzword or the hype, but rather focus on how can AI make my life easier and tackle tangible problems. This is quite tricky though, because there's a lot of factors, rapidly evolving field, a lot of different frameworks, technologies are coming out every single day. The need for new skills like agent ops appears. So this is something that we see as quite tricky. But we've observed successful deployments. There have been 6 key factors. Firstly, modularity. So this is rather than having a single big agent or application, focusing on breaking down the problem and having specialized sub-agents. This improves performance, but also allows you to be more targeted about how you optimize, and also, for instance, deploy on specific modules rather than on the whole thing. Secondly, guardrails. And when we see guardrails be successful is at different layers. For instance, safety filters. In the case of Google's model, Gemini, this happens at the model layer, so you can turn off and on different filters. But also rules. And rules can be both technical, like timeouts or escalations, but also business rules, of how you want the agent to behave. And then finally, response validation is, of course, quite important. Humans in the loop, and this was mentioned by Emma as well. We see this as absolutely crucial for ensuring accuracy, performance, training as well. And training can, quote unquote, training can be as simple as providing a few examples in the prompt, what is now called in-context learning. I think every few months we change the buzzword. And this is particularly important in sensitive domains. The more sensitive the domain, the more human in the loop, the more frequent and intense human in the loop there will be. Thirdly, scalability. So being able to manage resources, understanding tokens, how many tokens is in a document, in an image, understanding that so you can manage your API quotas effectively. So GPUs and TPUs, AI infrastructure is still a scarce resource, so important to understand what the limitations are and being able to scale. And this is important, of course, to be able to scale your operations, but also do so cost effectively. Fifth, observability. So being able to understand why your agents are performing the way that they are, how they're performing, understanding root causes of certain poor feedback, for instance, will be particularly important. And then finally, security. And with Google, we give a lot of assurances around security of the model, but in many cases, agents are going to handle sensitive data. So being able to modify those systems in line with regulation, with compliance, will be particularly important. I want to talk a little bit about a customer of ours, Hiscox, as a specialist insurer. And what they did was something that I found quite groundbreaking, quite cool, because they effectively reinvented how they do a business process, how they do underwriting. So in one of their service lines, they had an incredibly manual process in which they would receive an email request from a customer. And this email might request a few things in terms of insurance policy, but likewise might share an old contract or an old policy. And so they had a lot of unstructured data that they need to manage. They would review this for several days and then get to a quote, and then finally conclude the process. After maybe days, sometimes it's stretched over to a week. With an AI agent, they automated the processing of the unstructured data, and through human in the loop, i.e. the agent would respond and provide a proposal for the underwriter. They could then approve or reject. So a lot more productive. Basically, went from about 3 days to 3 minutes, which I found quite impressive. Cool. On AI agents with Google, so now we've covered some of the value that can be derived from agents, some common use cases, also some success factors, and Hiscox as a case study. Now I want to talk a bit about some different technologies. So Gemini 2.5 is now in preview. We focused, of course, on performance and multimodality. This has been in line with previous releases. But now we've gone the extra mile in terms of optimizing this model to do agentic tasks, such as reasoning and planning. So definitely, it's in preview, so definitely test it out. I found it to be quite impressive, so please go ahead. And performance is particularly important for some use cases. For instance, one of our fintech customers is using an AI to be the first line of defense for customer service. So for instance, you want to ask a question, or you want to complain, or you want to request something, you go to their customer service. Their first line of defense is an AI agent. And they have such high traffic of customer service that every percentage point of improvement in being able to handle those conversations autonomously by the agent, for them is tens of thousands of pounds in savings. So they measure every single percentage point and want to squeeze as much performance as possible. Last week, we also announced Agent Builder, which are 3 offerings to be able to build agents. So the first is being able to build with code. So a framework called Agent Development Kit, ADK, which presents a higher level of abstraction than a LangGraph or LangChain. It abstracts away certain tasks like session management and so forth. Secondly, Agent Engine. So this is to use libraries like LangGraph, LangChain, but also Agent Framework to very easily deploy on infrastructure. And then finally, Agent Garden, which is around sharing, distributing agents. And this can be agents built by us, built by you for people in the organization, but also for third parties to be able to commercialize their agents. A particularly exciting announcement as well that came last week, and this has generated a lot of conversation, is the agent-to-agent protocol. So basically, what we want to do is propose a way for agents in the future to communicate, to have effective multi-agent systems, regardless of where that agent comes from. And this is complementary to another protocol called MCP, which you may have heard about, released by Anthropic. And here the focus is on agent-to-agent communication, whereas MCP is more agent-to-tool or agent-to-data source communication. And this allows for things like secure collaboration, being able to manage the end task and the states of the agents, being able to reach a conclusion in terms of UX with the end user, but also to discover capabilities through standardization of agent cards that share what an agent can do. Of course, I mentioned measuring performance is absolutely key. And in our family of products, we have different options to be able to evaluate. So with our AI platform called Vertex, you can evaluate different foundation models, different frameworks through different criteria. So we have options such as being able to assess your models with a judger LLM, but also define criteria for evaluating the models. Now we've released rubrics, which is great for qualitative assessment of different scores. And you can do it online, but also batch prior to releasing. So a lot of focus on performance, understanding performance of your agents, observing how their agents are doing, and many tools at your disposal to be able to do that. And finally, here's just an overview. We've talked a lot about agent builder, so models, being able to build, deploy agents, tools to be able to do that. But we're also working very hard to be able to surface that through end users. So we've released a product called Agent Space, which is our response to AI search and productivity for the enterprise. And this will be also a platform to be able to build and surface agents in the enterprise. Agent Designer for no-code building of agents. And finally, Customer Engagement Suite, which is our product for automating customer service operations. A way to quickly get started is with Agent Starter Pack. So this is a GitHub repo with many templates and examples to be able to move to production. So definitely check this out if you're interested. Cool. So we'll move on to some demos. So I want to share a couple of different agents. And you may or may not have come across this. By show of hands, who has heard of deep research? Okay, about half. So bear with me, those that have heard of it. So deep research is basically an agent that you ask it to research a specific topic, and it goes and scours the web to be able to respond and curate a report that answers to that. So I can ask it something like, imagine I'm a new investor, and I'm a retail investor, and I want to invest for the first time in stocks. So I would say, can you look into where I can invest in, for instance, the gaming sector? And because human in the loop is incorporated with this agent, what it will do first before starting to do any sort of research is it'll come back to me and ask, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Are you okay with that? Can you provide any feedback? Okay, so what it's done is it's provided a plan. So it's executed on planning for what it wants to do. And it's suggesting, well, first, I'll identify the main ways that you can invest. Secondly, find companies. Third, research ETFs. Of course, analyze recent financial data, understand trends, and then other things like risks, and then synthesize the findings so that you can consume it. And I'm going to say, look, actually, I want you to focus on the UK. So this is so that I can iterate with that agent, and before it goes and does a lot of work, I can nail or basically be a bit more precise about what it would like it to focus on. So now it's changed the plan to make it more focused on the UK. So now I'm just going to start the research. So what it's doing now is taking that plan and making it very specific in terms of where it's going to get the information from, and goes across many websites. And this tool is super powerful. I honestly use this most days, from anything to my personal life, researching about a topic I don't know about, but also for work. I'm meeting with a new customer, I want to understand a bit more about the market in which they operate. So super useful tool. So I'm going to fast forward, as I've already done this search, and it returns a report, a well-structured report, and it's come up with its own proposal of a structure, but of course you can specify that if you would like. And it talks about the gaming sector, key trends, competitive landscape, regulation, some specific companies. So it's already given me what I want, basically some ideas of stocks I can invest in, but also a lot of information that I should consider before doing that. So that's demo number 1 that I wanted to show you. Demo number 2 is particularly exciting because it brings together a lot of different capabilities. So it brings together multimodality, real-time responses, reasoning, but also being able to access the web. So what we have is Gemini Live, which is basically a way to interact with video and audio with an agent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with Gemini. Hi, can you tell me what you're seeing?
I see the CNN Business Markets page, which shows the Dow, S&P 500, and NASDAQ indices are all up. Extreme fear is driving the US market. Today's hot stocks include NVDA, PLTR, INTC, AAPL,
Can you
TSL.
maybe just summarize the trends on today's hot stocks?
Sure. Of the hot stocks listed, Ford and Palantir Technologies show the largest percentage increase today, with Ford up 4.07% and Palantir up 4.60%. BigBear.ai shows the largest percentage decrease at negative 6.76%. Is there anything else you would like me to summarize on the page?
No, thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, can you tell me some highlights from the Financial Times?
Okay, on the Financial Times page, I see top stories including UK jobs market weakens as economy faces tariff hit. Ryanair warns aircraft deliveries at risk from tariff chaos. Trump administration halts $2 billion in Harvard funds. And UK consumers plan to buy British as Trump's trade war bites. There's also a spotlight on the Middle East war and news about British steel, US-China relations, and an interview with Oscar Ozil. Is there any one of these stories that you'd like me to expand on?
Are there any insights I could use for my own personal investments?
Based on the headlines, here are a few potential insights. The diamond industry is in crisis as Trump tariffs rock the market. Goldman Sachs chief is hopeful Trump will listen to corporate America. Meta may have a monopoly power after buying rival apps. El Salvador's Bukele refuses to repatriate.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anything else I can help you with?
No, good, thank you. Okay, great. So thank you for your time.
We're going to kick off our panel now. Welcome back, everyone. And what I'm going to do first is get each of our panelists to provide a quick introduction to themselves. We actually have a bunch of questions and areas and topics that we've kind of pre-prepared, which will take up probably about 15-20 minutes. And then we've got questions starting to come through from yourselves. Just a quick reminder, if you want to submit questions, go to slido.com. That is the access code for today's event, and just type in your questions. Yeah, Mike, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Mike. I'm CTO and co-founded Multiply with Vivek. Before that, I had a background in computational research. So these days, I'm responsible for building out and leading all of our tech, including our AI agent technology, to deliver automated financial advice. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, my name is Roger Portnoy. Let's see, what should I say about myself career-wise? I don't work for anyone at the moment. I work for 6 companies. I'm the chairman of a firm called Acelex, which is a private equity data extraction company. I'm also the strategic advisor for Objectway, which is in the portfolio management, digital wealth, operational space. I'm on the board of a company that does financial wellness called BipIt. So I have a lot of involvement with wealth technology and financial services and AI. I actually built a neural networks model in 1997. So I've been doing AI in various forms for about 30 years.
Cool. No, you don't need to pass that over. Great. Alvaro, I guess you've already given a talk, but I don't know whether there's any more of an introduction you want to provide.
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, AI specialist with Google. My role is to connect customers with our AI portfolio, understand it a bit further. A big part of my role, especially earlier stage conversations where customers are trying to understand a bit more about the technology, where they can invest it, so helping to frame and prioritize those investments. In terms of background, a bit mixed. So I was in consulting for a while, so more on the advisory side of AI, with McKinsey, with IBM, and then I moved over to a niche partner to focus more on building AI solutions prior to joining Google about 2 years ago. Anyway, great to be with you today.
Hi everyone, pleasure to be here. My name is Akash. I'm a principal at Earlybird. For those of you who don't know, Earlybird's a early stage European venture capital firm. We've been investing in Europe since 1997. Fintech's always been a key pillar for us, so we've actually invested in quite a few consumer names. So if you know N26 in mainland Europe, probably the biggest neobank, also increasingly moving into trading. On the B2B side, we've invested in companies like Upvest. So they, for example, power Revolut's trading product. And my time is split between fintech and software, and within software, mostly applied AI, where we've looked quite a bit at agents being introduced into the world of the buy side. For example, automating investment research, back office operations. So relationship managers and wealth managers can focus on where they really move the needle for their clients. So all quite familiar territory for the last couple of years as we've been seeing founders tackle this space.
Cool. I mean, Akash, why don't we kick off with you then in terms of talking through some of the developments that you've been particularly excited about in terms of applications of agents. And it doesn't need to be restricted necessarily to fintech or the advice space, but even broader than that.
Yeah, I'd say the big caveat or preface would be that we're still very early in the agentic era. We probably were and still are in the co-pilot phase more or less in the last 2-3 years. The reason being that for most tasks that we'd like to see be automated end to end, there's still quite a few building blocks that need to be laid for agents to be autonomous and do the work to the level of capability of a mid-level and senior level person. So if you go, let's say, profession by profession in coding, the company that is most, I think, highly regarded is Cursor at the moment, or AnySphere, but Cursor is the product. And that is more like a co-pilot, isn't replacing a software engineer yet. There are some companies doing that, like Cognition, but actually those have still proven to be very buggy. In customer support, you have companies like Decagon, Sierra. In London, you have Gradient Labs, who are also at this time mostly tackling the long tail of quite easy tickets to resolve. And sure enough, over time, they will graduate to become capable of handling very edge cases and very complex tickets. But the key point is that as of 2025, at least, and likely for the next couple of years, they're only coming for very junior workflows or junior employee workflows. And in time, they will graduate. But the way that they will become ubiquitous is probably earning trust from the customer. So any enterprise isn't going to be comfortable letting an agent run wild with access to all kinds of data sources that they could read or write to, potentially security issues with vulnerabilities being introduced. So I would say we should really take a long-term horizon on this. And then to Vivek's question, I think truthfully, every vertical is going to be ripe for wholesale disruption. And then you think about, obviously, labor spend being a big part of the market size for these agents. But I think the silver lining among all of this is that it's going to make the best people 10 times better because they'll be freed from a lot of the mundane work. So yeah, I'd say those are just a couple of examples, but I think over time it'll be in most verticals.
Cool. Roger, maybe coming over to you, like are there particular applications you're coming across that excite you?
Yeah, I think there's like three areas that I've seen some attempts to provide the agentic way of thinking to. I mean, one is, and I did work on this one myself, which was how to take email correspondences that had come in for client service purposes and have agents effectively do the extraction, understand the problem, generate the response, and hand it to the agent. So not deliver it immediately back to the customer, but actually interact with the agent who had to then know what to say or what to do with that customer. And actually, if you go to a lot of the retail banking arena or to collections, areas like that, this technology has already been deployed. But it hasn't yet been deployed to be the full task end-to-end manager. Rather, it's been 75% of the activity and then 25% to the human. Some of the other areas that I've seen worked on really involve how you get data in the fact find more effectively. So there are two methods being tried. One method is to let the human do the interaction, but then let the machine do all the tasks related to the recognition and the extraction and the implementation into the CRM. So for example, if you use a product like Sembly, I don't know, has anyone used Sembly in the room? Sembly is like a product where you can go into a chat with someone, it records everything, it summarizes everything, it comes back with the key points from the conversation, and then it allows you to start a task. Well, if you put an agent on top of Sembly, you can basically have the agent look at what you just recorded, extract all the facts from that, present those facts back to the advisor. The advisor just goes to approve, and then it goes downstream into IntelliFlow or Iris or whatever your downstream system is. So I think these are quite mature-ish forms of early agent thinking without fully enabling autonomous activity. So I think we are in that world. We're in the world of enable, facilitate, but not yet autonomous. But autonomous is like 10 to 12 months away for tasks that people become confident about.
Cool, thanks, Roger. Mike, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think, well, I guess, yes. So yeah, I think Vivek touched early on what the real advantages or what LLMs have really brought to this. So we've had, agent-like systems for a long time. They're actually nothing particularly new. But what the LLMs really give you is this ability to handle human text, the kind of interfaces, work with the kind of interfaces that humans excel at. They also provide the ability to generate text in a way that we've previously only been able to really do with very structured templating and things like that. And then the real key bit, which is the kind of glue in the middle, which we saw some really great demonstrations of earlier, but this kind of very general purpose reasoning engine. And so the things that I think really unlocks are things that we've had real trouble with previously, which are, your customer support chatbot type thing, where previously, we've all, you go to change your address at your mobile phone provider or something like that, and the whole game of using the chatbot is to try and nudge the chatbot into the kind of decision pathway that's going to lead to you actually being able to do the thing that you wanted to do. Those sorts of things are really low-hanging fruit to improve because the existing experiences were awful, and the LLMs make it so easy from a developer point of view to unlock. As Roger kind of implied, I think the things that really become challenging and the things that we're going to see have to wait a lot longer for are ones where there's an element of judgment, and particularly, I guess, in the financial context, where that judgment has a kind of regulatory weight. And the challenge is, these agents are ultimately going to be, if you want to expose them to customers and have them give advice, they're going to be giving that advice on behalf of an organization. There's going to be somebody on that organization who will have had to sign that off, and that person will be on the line with the FCA with potential prison time if they get it wrong. Now, that's a pretty strong motivator to have really good understanding of how these things work. Now, we have systems. It's not like this problem doesn't exist with humans. We have all these challenges around regulating the conduct of real human advisors. I think that exactly the same thing is going to happen with AI agents, but it's going to take an awful lot longer because we just don't have a good intuitive feel for how they work. We still don't have great sense of the failure cases, and I think as a result, we kind of see the low-hanging fruit of customer service bots. We're going to see a lot of back-end stuff where there's still a human that's kind of finally having to sign things off. And then I think over time in financial services, increasingly, we'll begin to understand and what we can kind of trust them with. And at some point, the business case starts stacking up and somebody will say, okay, well, obviously it's a risk, but I can see the bottom line. This is going to save us, so many % on make us so much on year that it's worth taking that risk. And at that point, obviously, I think things start to shift quite quickly.
Cool, thanks, Mike. Alvaro, I wonder whether there's anything you'd want to talk about in terms of the work you're doing currently around safety and guardrails and controls, because I know that is a big theme for you guys here at Google, and addressing some of the stuff that Mike just talked about.
Absolutely. So I think a few things to bear in mind. This varies greatly on the type of use case. So depending on the sector, heavily regulated sectors, of course, are at higher risk, whether that application or agent is internally facing towards internal productivity, or if it's end customer facing, where you have to manage safety and security at scale. I think the type of risk and the scale of that risk as well varies greatly. So our recommendation is to introduce safeguards or guardrails at different layers of the application. And I made allusion to this in my presentation, but you at the model layer, you can tweak the model such that it doesn't produce, for instance, harmful content. Then on top of that, you can add things like guardrails, business rules, hard logic, etc., to stop certain types of answers. And then finally, of course, if you're getting interacting with end customers, you can do things like protecting against prompt injection or harmful input, etc. One product that we've built that is aims to answer a lot of these points is called Model Armor, in which what it does basically is if you build an agentic application or an agent, it looks at what the user is inputting and what the model is outputting and provides guardrails that you can customize to make the application safer. So definitely would encourage you to, well, firstly, check this product out if relevant, but secondly, understand what safeguards you can introduce at different layers. It's not enough to just write a nice prompt and ask the LLM not to do anything bad. I think you have to go a step further and introduce some hard logic and rules around it.
Yeah, I just want to expand on that because I really think that this is a really important point, and it's about getting through to kind of the compliance people in the kind of organizations that we're talking about in the finance industry. I think Google's going to do a great job of mitigating some of the systemic risks that you're going to see sort of cross vertical. So all the industries are going to have problems with harmful content coming out. I think finance, we have some really specific risks around language, particularly in advice, which is obviously what we're in. The example I often give is High Street Bank is currently, has recently been fined, hundreds of millions of pounds for the use of their word competitive in essentially a recommendation for an insurance product. So the word competitive, it feels quite, I think if you're outside the financial industry, you might think, that's a fairly inconspicuous word. What's the harm in that? Well, the harm in this case was they weren't able to provide the justification for why their prices were competitive, 20 years ago when these recommendations were made. And because of their size and because of their influence in the market, the FCA, the Ombudsman, came down hard on them. And that kind of risk, engineers, I think, out of the box, are not going to understand that kind of risk. The people who understand that kind of risk are the people who've, had the conversations with the FCA. They've read the COB's handbook. They understand what is and isn't okay. I think there's a real opportunity there for, more maybe creatively minded people in the compliance industry, if those exist. But in terms of, I don't think those problems are going to be solved at the platform layer, because they need a really specific domain understanding of what is and isn't okay. And they need people who are kind of able to interpret the principles that the regulator puts down and understand the technology that's going to deliver stuff in the future. That's a really interesting specific skill set. It requires engineering knowledge, but it requires a lot of domain knowledge and compliance knowledge. And those are the kind of people that I think we're really, really going to need, and are going to be really, really valuable if we're actually going to see this deployed at scale.
If I could just add one thing, I think maybe everybody in this room remembers 2017 defined benefit to defined contribution to SIP, that cycle. And the failure in that cycle, if there was a failure, was the lack of the triage being sort of implemented properly in all the organizations that were undertaking that activity. I think AI is no different. It's a governance question. If you want to utilize agents in your business, you've got to build a governance framework. That governance framework is going to have a triage well beyond whatever technology is able to deliver. That triage is not a compliance-only opportunity. It's really a leadership question, which is if you're going to embrace the technology, you're going to have to build the governance framework to support where you deploy it, how you manage it, how you monitor it, how you upgrade it, how you take it out of activity when it's hallucinating, et cetera. And I think the FCA is more likely to look for that than they are to look for a compliance-related solution. They're looking for organizations to think, how do I build the right governance model around technology that can change my target operating model? Because if you're in this room, your target operating model 3 years from now should be 80% front office and 20% back office, if the technology lives up to its expectations. And that means everybody in this room is going to be running a profitable and scalable business. But if you have the wrong governance model, you will fail in that way, and that will lead to far worse consequences for your business.
I'm going to actually pass on to Akash, because on this theme of deploying agents well, implementing it in the right ways, are there any other kind of observations that you can bring in from what you're seeing in the market?
Yeah, I think a lot of points were covered. Essentially, when you think about agents being able to log into systems that you have and have the permission to potentially, for example, automatically send an email to your client after you've finished a meeting with them, things like that, where you really want to, put it really on autopilot. There's a lot still to be solved on authentication. So you may want to give really fine-grained control over the things they can do. Today, most authentication methods still are probably lacking in that regard. There's definitely concerns around security. So some of you will have heard there's a new standard for integrating into data sources called the Model Context Protocol. And that also currently struggles from the fact that a lot of the servers that are being written, so for example, if you want to integrate your agent with Slack or Google Drive, for example, at this time, most companies don't yet support official servers, so the community has built a bunch of servers. And if an agent integrates into that server, there's a bunch of vulnerabilities that could be introduced or security issues that arise. So authentication security are definitely two of the main issues still impeding wider adoption. But even fundamentally, the capabilities that you want these agents to have, it's not as straightforward as chaining a few prompts together and saying, first do this, then do that. You want it to be able to obviously handle cases that it hasn't seen before. You want to effectively also make sure that it's as deterministic as possible. So if two clients ask you the same question, and they have the same demographic or the same set of characteristics, it should still give them the same product recommendation each time, right? And that means maybe it needs to traverse a knowledge graph. You might build you might take all the data you have on your clients, all this unstructured data and the structured data, and you might store it in a database that is leading to the model always giving the same answer, which is what you want, especially in a regulated context, where you don't want to be discriminating against people, or you don't want it to be too probabilistic, which is an inherent quality of the models, but obviously it's not the service you want to give to your clients. So if I would summarize into three pieces: authentication, security, but then also the data piece, which is how do you expose your data for these agents to be able to deliver both the accuracy, cost effectively, and also in a way that is then complying with all the regulations to come.
Cool, thanks. We've actually got a load of questions that have come in, so I'm going to move the topics on to almost like future gazing, looking out into the future, the kind of developments we can expect from agents and how we can see them kind of evolve. I don't know, Alvaro, whether you've got thoughts on aspects you're excited about. I know when you did your presentation, you talked a bit about memory. I know that's something that a lot of firms are talking about, but yeah.
To be honest, where I'm the most excited is similar themes to what Akash was touching on, which is around agent to tool, agent to data, and agent to agent communication. So in my presentation, I mentioned the agent to agent protocol, which is a first step in creating a standard so that agents, no matter who has built them or how they've been built, they can talk to each other. I think this is a great first step in achieving the scale of AI systems that will let us truly tackle very complex tasks, So being able to deploy tens or hundreds of agents for a specific task, for a really big project, will only be achieved if those agents can communicate with each other and with tools effectively. So I think something to look out for is as those protocols mature and are adopted, the scale and the size of the problem and also the scale in terms of time will increase, and this will allow agents to tackle bigger and longer problems. I think I'm particularly excited about that. I'm also quite excited about some very recent developments in multimodality and real-time understanding. So the demo that I did, which was quite simple, just sharing screen and asking a model what it's seeing and to give us some thoughts and ideas. I've been checking in on that technology every single week since it came out last December, and only this week has it been mature enough so that I think, okay, we're getting somewhere. So that, yeah, exactly. I can demo it live in front of 70 people, exactly. So those recent developments in both real-time reasoning and response generation, but also being able to do it in a multimodal way, very, very excited about it, because now that that's been unleashed, I think a lot of new applications will be developed. Those are just two things I'm excited about, but I could go on.
Mike, same question for you.
Yeah, I mean, curiously, I think I'm looking forward to progress slowing down, which sounds very counterintuitive, but I mean something quite specific by it. So we've seen, unbelievable model progress. I mean, I mentioned earlier, having seen the demos, it's amazing how quickly you become just completely used to demos that when we started Multiply, this would have been magic. It would have been magic, and it would have been very fanciful to look at, and we're very quickly become used to it. But the real challenge is when the technology is improving at such a dramatic rate, why would you invest a load of effort in implementing something based on where they are now, when chances are 6 months come along and OpenAI or Google have essentially made all your investment obsolete because they've released a new version of the model, they've released their own tools that kind of make all your investment obsolete. I think this is a real problem. It's a problem for startups as well as larger companies. I would say the good news now, I think, is that there is still an awful lot of progress, but a lot more of that progress is I think, what I would call quality of life progress. You've sort of seen the bare performance, although obviously there are things that's still improving, and particularly multimodality, I think, is a really, really big improvement. But a lot more of the kind of announcements that are coming out are the kind of announcements like, how do we make inter-agent communication standardized? How do we make the way in which data can come from, a user can share data with an agent standardized? And these things come because there's a level of stability in terms of the base product. There's a sense of what the landscape might look like emerging. And it basically provides a platform in which everyone can then, invest and build. So yeah, slightly maybe counterintuitive, but I think that's a really great sign for the maturity of the industry.
So I think there's a few things that would get me excited about where we're heading. One would be the question of accessibility. We're living in the consumer duty of care age. And obviously, when you see the demo that Google showed, voice activation and interacting with a person through whatever medium best suits that person automatically, that's like a must-have of the future. Because there's a lot of disadvantaged people, and those disadvantaged people need accessibility to your services, but they may be denied it because they can't interact with the browser, they can't use a mobile phone in a particular way. And what we're seeing is a way to overcome all that. So hopefully people will understand that they can almost rebuild the interfaces that last between you and your client, and truly create what's called omni-channel. Because we have omni-channel access today, but we don't have omni-channel accessibility. So that would be a development I hope Google and others would advance. I think the other thing is the nature of what I call true next best action. I think everybody in the room wants to always do the right thing by every client that they've onboarded. And obviously some clients get lots of attention, other clients get no attention at all, and some clients get unfortunately forgotten because they've moved on in some particular way and the CRM system's completely out of date, blah, blah, blah. If you think about the natural progression of agentic way of thinking, there shouldn't be any client that you're not aware of. If you deploy it properly on your own systems, it should be possible for you to be able to direct the next best action for any client, because the system will have the ability to create and maintain the right data, instead of you living in the world of legacy data, which most of you are. That's going to be the biggest opportunity for the wealth management industry. Now, I don't think we're anywhere near there yet, but that's the direction of travel in the progress area that would most impact the wealth management industry. So I hope to see that happen soon.
Cool. Thanks, Roger. I'm now going to move on to questions, and we've got a couple of questions that have come through that are kind of linked. So Alvaro, I think this is kind of referring to the kind of the example you provided, but the question is, in your UK gaming example, what are the safeguards that stop a personalized investment recommendation without having done suitability? And that is, I don't know, do you understand what that means, or?
Maybe if you can elaborate on the concept of suitability.
Yeah, so here in the UK, to make a personal investment, like to recommend specific stocks, that constitutes advice, that's a personal recommendation. And there are all these checks and balances that need to take place before you do that. And it's got to come from an advisor, and you've got to be a regulated firm to do that. That's the context, I guess, of the question.
Okay. So if it's asking where are the safeguards, that application has no safeguards because it's not a recommendation for investments. It's a general purpose tool for research that, in my example, I said, hey, I would like some inspiration and ideas of companies where I can invest. And the report was well curated in that it said, look, here are some companies, here are some trends, here are some risks. And then you can do with that information what you will. You can pass it along to a friend, you can consume it yourself, or you can use it for investment decisions. So it wasn't, I think, aspiring to be that. Yeah. That being said, in terms of the safeguard, if someone should go or would want to go and build a recommendation engine for potential investments for like the retail or the consumer market, definitely you should consider all the safeguards that I mentioned before, at a first instance. Yeah. And then, of course, add all the other layers to make it compliant or with regulation. I'm not a domain expert in that, so wouldn't be able to advise specifically as to what those are.
That's where we come in, don't worry.
I hope that answers the question too.
Kind of linked to that, we've got another question that's come through, and which is, if AI is so good at reading and I guess comprehending text, why can't you just upload all the FCA handbooks and expect it to execute it to the letter? And I'm going to direct this to Mike because this is something I've had a bit of experience.
It's a fantastic question. I guess the pithy response is, if I get my junior financial advisor to read all of the FCA handbooks, can I then expect them to go out and deliver suitable advice every time? Probably not. But the real answer is you can do that. You can actually, you can probably put a large proportion of the FCA regulations just into the context of the model. So you don't even have to do an additional level of training. The context windows for these things are so huge now that you can put a reasonable amount in there. But the problem is the agent, when it's the raw LLM, when it's responding, is essentially trying to optimize towards various things. And actually understanding exactly what's driving each response is a subject of research. Anthropic put out a bunch of papers a couple of weeks ago where they look at actually, because of the way they're trained on I guess, semantic consistency, they're very, very strongly driven by semantic consistency over, the commands you give it explicitly, and that can lead to some of the challenges with controlling them. So really, the answer is we have something that can probably be, certainly can understand those regulations, can follow them, but we'll have other things at play, and it's exactly the same challenge with human advisors. They have obviously the regulatory rules that are at play, but there are other things that are motivating them, things like commercial reward or personal relationships or that sort of thing. And the answer is control systems. Certainly we at Multiply think that you don't get the LLM to do the whole advice piece. It's capable of giving you a relatively good answer. It's capable of, as we've seen, putting together some investment recommendations. But that is ultimately an example of something where companies are going to want deterministic control of the output. And so you need an engine that's going to have deterministic control of the output. The LLM can feed into that engine. It can, extract data from a bunch of customer documentation as well as a conversation to feed into that kind of engine. It can then be responsible for reporting back that information. But there needs to be something there where ultimately somebody in the compliance scheme can see, okay, we're only recommending those products in those circumstances, and has a sense of control. And that's, I guess, what the agent workflow is designed to give us. It's designed to give us boxes where we can have control and boxes where we're more flexible and can react more to what the customer wants. And I guess part of the journey over the next couple of years is going to be working out what all those boxes are and which ones we do trust the agents for, and which ones we're always going to need a level of control, because it ultimately amounts to businesses, I guess, fundamental services that businesses deliver that they need to have that control over.
I'd add one thing, which is I think the question asked is the wrong question. The machine can do what has been described by the question, but the machine isn't there to understand how you interpreted the conduct of business principles that are provided by the FCA. Not yet, at least. So really, again, it's a question of how do you augment what the machine can do? The answer to that person's question would be all of your actual interpretive cases need to be also loaded into the machine. Because then you have what your interpretation of what our principles was and whether that was correct or not. The machine will infer through semantics what it thinks is correct because it's working through a semantic-based approach on natural language. Your interpretation of the conduct of business is based on your experience with how the FCA expects you to apply the principles. So until the machine understands that context, it can't make the right decisions. But it will if you give it 50,000, 100,000, which is why large firms, in theory, have such an advantage in this particular race. If you're SJP, you might have 1 million cases to load. If those 1 million cases are all well decided, you have a very good starting point in your ability to do what has been described by that question.
Cool, thanks, Roger. I'm going to try and combine a couple more questions because we've only got a few minutes left. But there's one here around on the org chart I presented. Do you think firms are starting to think about the future of work and how to work with these AI agents, perhaps instead of looking at licensing software? And what are the use cases that are furthest along in your experience? Akash, I'm going to come to you on that because perhaps you can bring some observations from beyond the world of financial advice and wealth and see if people are starting to, across industries, are starting to think this way.
Yeah, we definitely see the companies that have emerged in the last few years. I would definitely consider the post, let's say, ChatGPT era we're in, that the org chart will look very different. And they can evaluate every hire from first principles, i.e. how far can we get with AI capabilities versus hiring a person. The first roles where this happened was marketing, at least in our observation. On the software engineering side, you still have usually the same number of engineers. It's just that the first engineers, you have so much leverage on them that you don't need to hire many more after that. But the first marketing hire has been postponed significantly because you can generate content, you can write copy for social media, etc., quite effectively as just a founder of a company. On the sales side, that's still quite heavily debated, but mostly the impact of AI has been felt at the top of the funnel. So you would maybe see fewer SDRs. That was the claim for quite a while, but actually most of these companies that claim to be full AI SDRs, when they're used heavily by their customers, the SDRs don't get fired. The humans, they still keep their jobs actually, or they become AEs. So I would also say in that respect, the impact on the org chart is probably overstated, at least as of today. And even though there's scope for all the capabilities to get much, much better, so they're much more personable, you can have at some stage maybe AI avatars that can also do prospecting of an account, but also potentially handle some interactions with clients in a wealth management context. And that will come eventually, and issues around like lip syncing and so on are going to get resolved. There's still an element where obviously humans value a human touch. And so in this B2B sales context, a buyer will always care that the person actually selling to them is another human, because there's such a trust factor, and there's so many psychological factors that go into purchasing software or being prescribed advice. So we don't see that changing even if the technology matures. We actually think most of the stuff that's down or late stage funnel will still be heavily human mediated. And then I think operations is where you can, for example, doing payroll, your bookkeeping, you can either get quite far with DIY solutions with AI these days, or the service providers that are emerging now that are AI native, they're so much cheaper that you don't maybe need a full-time person who's just managing ops for your fledgling company. So I think that's why you see so many breakout AI companies today having fewer than 20 people. There's even a leaderboard called the Lean AI Native leaderboard, and these companies are just typically less than 25 people, all more than 5 million of ARR, and some much more. And the leverage they've had on every person, if you just imagine at scale, the per FTE revenue for a mature, high quality software company is supposed to be about 400K. These companies have 1 million plus in most cases. So it's really phenomenal to see this leverage you get on every person now. And the idea is every employee should be a 10x employee. In the past, you had this big bifurcation between your best people and your, let's say, the people that need to be improved. And now you would hope to make every employee a 10x employee.
Cool. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but we can do maybe a very quick fire round because there's another theme that's coming through around. There's a couple of themes. There's one around how these models or agents are trained, and there's another one around the ESG impacts of generative AI and agents. So I don't know whether any of you have any quick thoughts you can offer on either of those themes.
I guess I can speak on the training side. So when we talk about training agents, it happens again at different levels. So you've got the foundation model. In the case of Google, that's Gemini. In the case of Anthropic, it's Claude, et cetera. And this is, in a way, a packaged model that has been trained on vast amounts of data. So it would be like the first point of call. After that, you can take that technology, take that foundation model, use it as is or fine tune it. So that extra fine tuning would also constitute training, and then embedded within an agent application. And you can also tune that agent, and that tuning can happen in different ways, such as in context learning or the prompt engineering and so forth. So I think different levels at which the agent can learn. And I think the question makes reference to the first level in terms of, that foundation model, what is it trained on? And this really depends on your foundation model provider and what their policies are around data collection, curation, and then training, or how they feed that training data onto the model. In the case of Google, we're very, very careful with the training data that we provide to Gemini to train it, avoiding things like copyrighted data or harmful content, and curating the data so that that is matched in terms of performance, but also there are very few risks in terms of being able to generate copyrighted content, for instance, to the point that when we sell Gemini to our customers, we extend the guarantee that, if someone should sue them or should they have any liability in terms of producing copyrighted content, we would take on that case to defend them because we have very high degree of confidence in terms of the training data that we've given to Gemini. But again, this really depends on who's providing that foundation model. I hope that helps to answer the question.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the point of bias because I saw a question up there about it. I think this is a really interesting one because we know that LLMs can encode biases and stereotypes that they've drawn from the training data in ways that are sometimes unpredictable. But I guess the real challenge is measuring that. And I guess the challenge I kind of put to firms for example, in the advice space, let's say, is how biased are your advisors? Do you know how biased they are? Do you know how many business opportunities you're missing out, investment opportunities? Do you know how many customers have gone with a different firm because the way you were communicating with them, the types of advisors you put in front of them? I think, honestly, companies that have a mature answer to that are probably going to be very well set to evaluate LLMs and manage the risk there. But I would say that I would be very surprised if, obviously we've thought a lot about consumer duty. It definitely is something that gets talked about a lot more. But in terms of, I guess, real actionable statistics that back up those kind of more general points, I don't see that many of them across the industry. I think really understanding that is key. And as soon as you understand that, you see that, I guess, LLMs and the use of AI agents is very much, it's a challenge that we already face and one that I think we could already do a lot better at solving.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. There's still some outstanding questions, so if you want to hang around afterwards, the panelists will be around. A number of people from the Multiply team will also be around for you to come over, grab us, have a chat. But apart from that, I want to thank all the panelists. They've done a fantastic job. responding to the questions I asked, but also yours. So if we can give them a quick round of applause. I also want to extend a thank you to the team at Google. So there's Karen at the back, there's Alvaro, obviously, I think Maria's around. But if you've got any questions about any of the stuff that Alvaro went through earlier, don't hesitate to grab them. And apart from that, enjoy our white paper that we'll be sending out in the next day or so. And thanks for coming.